Well, hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is, without a doubt, one of the most bizarre and, honestly, truly baffling mysteries of the Second World War. You know, we spent a ton of time talking about the brilliant strategies, the tragic losses, and the massive technological leaps of that era. But what happens when the meticulous, incredibly detailed records of history collide with something that literally cannot be explained? The story we're unraveling today takes us straight up into the clouds of a world at war.
I want you to think about this question for a second. Just try to picture the sheer, massive scale of the war. We're talking millions of troops deployed across multiple continents. It's a conflict completely defined by roaring engines, heavy steel, and some really terrifying new explosives. Yet, right in the middle of all this grinding mechanical slaughter, there was this completely unexpected phenomenon. Something appeared in the sky that sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened, combat-tested pilots. And the craziest part about all of this? It scared the living daylights out of the Allied and Axis forces alike.
Section 1. The dangers of World War II skies setting the stage. Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly understand this mystery, we first have to look at the grim, chaotic realities that pilots were already facing well before anything supernatural or unexplainable ever showed up on their radars. So, 1941. This is an absolutely crucial turning point to remember. It was a time of massive intelligence failures. Obviously, the catastrophic surprise attack on Pearl Harbor comes to mind first. Because of these colossal blind spots, global militaries and especially their combat pilots were completely on edge, like total high alert. There was just constant gnawing anxiety about unexpected enemy capabilities. I mean, when you're flying thousands of feet in the air, knowing your enemy might have just invented a new weapon that your commanders know absolutely nothing about. Literally every single shadow in the clouds becomes a potential death sentence.
And to be fair, it wasn't just paranoia. The skies were genuinely terrifying. Listen to this quote. German pilots frequently death dive into Russian bombers, causing both the plunge flaming groundwards. Wow, this really illustrates the extreme, borderline unbelievable tactics that were already in play. The Luftwaffe literally deployed a kamikaze-style unit known as the Leonidas Squadron. These pilots actually signed a declaration acknowledging their mission would end in their death. It was a tactic the Germans called Selbstauffahrungssatz, a self-sacrifice mission. So imagine you're a pilot, and you're already dealing with enemies willing to intentionally crash their planes into you in midair. The psychological toll of that alone was just astronomical.
Section 2. The Foo Fighter Phenomenon. A baffling mystery. Right, so against that incredibly intense backdrop of extreme violence, mutual paranoia, and heavy mechanical warfare, something entirely unexplainable appeared.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer simplicity of the definition for something so utterly baffling. Foo Fighters were basically inexplicable, glowing objects witnessed in the sky. And I really want to emphasize that last part, witnessed by Allied and Axis pilots alike. This wasn't just some wild rumor started in one mess hall by a completely exhausted American crew. No way. This was a cross-faction phenomenon, and it was deeply, deeply unsettling to everyone who encountered them.
And it's important to realize this was by no means an isolated incident. The timeline really puts it into perspective. Initial sightings were reported in late 1942. But, they didn't just fade away after one weird night. Throughout 1943 and 1944, these sightings persisted across various theaters of the war. These things tracked planes, tailed bombers, and literally hovered in the periphery of intense dogfights, all the way up until their final documented wartime appearances in March 1945. So, for over 2 years, these glowing phenomena were persistent, uninvited guests in literally the deadliest airspace on Earth.
Section 3. Impossible speeds. Defying physics. So, what exactly were they doing that made them so terrifying? Let's take a look at their physical characteristics, because honestly, this is where the whole story defies all logic of 1940s engineering.
Pilots consistently reported seeing glowing disks or spheres that moved at impossible speeds and maneuvered at impossible angles. Now, to put that into perspective, imagine the heavy, roaring, incredibly cumbersome machinery of a 1940s B-17 bomber or a Messerschmitt fighter. They were incredibly loud, they absolutely obeyed the heavy laws of physics, and they required huge, wide arcs just to turn. But by stark contrast, these glowing orbs were eerie, they were completely silent, and they darted around the sky in ways that no known machine could possibly replicate without, just tearing itself apart.
Section 4. Secret enemy weapons, mutual paranoia. So the crucial point is, how does a rational, highly trained military pilot even begin to process what they're seeing when physics just seems to be breaking down right outside their cockpit window? Well, they relied on the one thing that made sense in a global war.
They assumed it was the enemy. Makes sense, right? Allied pilots genuinely believed they were being stalked by highly advanced, top-secret Nazi weapons. Meanwhile, Axis pilots looked at the exact same glowing orbs and thought, oh, those have to be advanced Allied weapons. It was this crazy cycle of intense mutual paranoia. Because neither side could explain the technology, everyone just naturally assumed their opponent had managed to invent some terrifying new weapon that was monitoring their every single move. And, we really have to legitimize the pilots' fears here, because rumors of radical, almost world-ending experimental weapons were constantly circulating back then. For instance, you might have heard of Die Glocke, or the Bell. This was a legendary, albeit totally unverified, project undertaken by Nazi Germany. The rumors suggested it used some kind of incredibly advanced technology, maybe an anti-gravitational or exotic propulsion system that belonged in outer space. Now, historians are quick to point out that no verified documentation of such a device was ever actually found, but if you're a pilot flying in the pitch black of night and you've heard whispers of a Nazi anti-gravity machine, yeah, seeing a glowing sphere darting around your wing is definitely going to validate your absolute worst nightmares. And this perfectly connects back to the broader wartime paranoia that had completely gripped both soldiers and civilians at the time. We can actually trace a lot of this psychological strain back to the Battle of Los Angeles in February 1942. Confused accounts and totally contradictory witness testimonies led to such massive fear that hundreds of U.S. anti-aircraft guns just opened fire on the night sky, and to this day, experts still can't say exactly what they were shooting at. We see this kind of strain repeatedly in the historical record, actually. During the Battle of the Bulge in 1944, 12,000 men of the 289th Infantry Regiment reported hearing eerie, disembodied voices warning them of artillery fire out of absolutely nowhere. The extreme stress of war made people incredibly susceptible to the unexplained, which, if you think about it, makes the sustained cross-faction Foo Fighter sightings all the more compelling.
Section 5. An unsolved mystery 70 years later. And this brilliantly illustrates where we stand today. Because after the war ended, the dust settled, classified files were opened up, interrogations were conducted. Surely someone had to take credit for these glowing spheres, right?
Well, actually, no. Over 70 years later, historians and experts still have absolutely no clear explanation for the phenomenon. Despite mountains, and I mean mountains, of historical research into the Second World War, which is arguably the most meticulously recorded conflict in human history, these events remained stubbornly and tantalizingly unresolved. There was no secret weapons program ever uncovered that matches the descriptions of the Foo Fighters. Neither side ever claimed them.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Imagine you are sitting in that cockpit. You're thousands of feet in the air, flying through a terrifying, chaotic storm of enemy flak. And right there, just outside your window, a silent, glowing sphere is perfectly matching your speed, completely defying the laws of aviation as you know them. Was it some secret technology lost to time? Was it a bizarre atmospheric anomaly? Or was it something else entirely? What were the armed forces actually seeing up there? It's a mystery that still haunts the skies of history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.